Greetings and welcome to In Depth. This is an In Depth with a Difference. We are speaking about local government reform. We're doing so with Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, Faris Al-Rawi. He is here to answer questions from the public along with some of mine. To welcome you, Minister. Thank you so much for being here. We know that time is at a premium at this point in time, but we took the opportunity to make some calls for members of the public to ask comments about local government reform. And we had Jason A. Mahaber. He was asking to kindly explain in detail how a reform benefits the citizens. I guess we'll ask for the three main points. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me on this program. And yes, time is at a premium, so I'm looking forward to getting to the punchlines. How can reform benefit the individual? Reform is exactly about the individual. It is about, number one, putting people in a place where they can see the relief that they request, have that performed immediately, and give them participation in it. It means basically jobs, faster service delivery, and the ability to track so that there is an accountable system that things can happen. Why jobs? With the system in the old version, you basically have 19 steps before anything can happen, literally, if you process map it. From the request of the individual, the citizen, to repair a pothole, from the citizen's request to cut an overgrown lot, to get planning permission, there are 19 steps if the job is over $200,000, which is in most cases, most jobs. We are now moving to a step where it's 7 steps alone. And in that 7 steps, we're seeing take more money, which is almost $65 million in the case of San Fernando, for example, just by property tax at $1 a day and $2 a day. Take the money that you usually give to Ministry of Education to do schools, etc., give it to the corporation. In other words, then, move it from an $11 million PSIP budget to a $100 million budget and take the power to hire right at the corporation, move down from 19 steps for approval, take 7 steps, and therefore have an economic explosion with people who live there.
And there was a question from Premchand Rambarose. He's saying that it took the PNM 8 years, and then it seems as though there's a narrative towards pushing reform now. So what was the process, or can you give us some steps along that timeline?
Well, it took the country 33 years to get to where we are. It didn't take the PNM 8 years. 8 years involved, number one, having consultations with every single entity. Why? You don't make law for yourself. You have to have the feedback from the ground. After that, legislation was drafted. Very significant forms were put into it, which required 2/3 majority, 3/4 majority, 3/5 majority support in the parliament. We had to wrestle with an opposition that refused to support local government reform. They did not support it. And therefore, we had to back away from some of the deeper reforms because we just couldn't pass the reform. So that was after consultation, Joint Select Committee, hitting the UNC wall because they will not support reform, coming to the Parliament and passing what we could, and then turning on the law. And it is quite simply, if you want better chance at security, if you want a significant number of jobs, because most people, those are the 2 main issues at local government. Then local government reform does it by shortening the time frame and allowing you, through an app, to track your reports. My pothole, on the app, you will see who is managing it, where it is done, what time frame it's going to take, and how you're going to pay for it.
And thank you for that. We had VINPM 60 asking the question, does local government elections affect the local government reform bill from being passed? And I guess this possibly ties into what you're talking about, simple majority, 3/5 majority. And this question was also echoed by Bobby Biharilal. So if the government loses the local government election, can or can they not still introduce the local reform? And as the government is in power, this from Rajesh Ramdayal, if the local government election is lost, will the government still be able to bring local government reform?
So those are 3 slightly different but similarly related issues, questions. The law has been passed. So it's already a law. It has been partially put on by proclamation. What we said was, let's start by giving the councillors 4 years so we can build out the systems. The Privy Council said, listen, your existing councillors, that does not apply to, so have an election, and we did. So the law has been passed. Turning on the law now certainly does depend upon some of the election aspects, because if you have UNC corporations that refuse to support the implementation of the law, then you're going to have some issues in implementation. That's what you call political sabotage. And political sabotage is a real consequence. So we've come to the country after 33 years of complaints since the 1990 legislation was passed. We've looked at the Tobago model. We've looked at how clean and better a chance at life Tobago represents. We've brought it to Trinidad. We've said remove 19 steps of running to Mars and Venus to get approvals. Take 7 steps, hire more people, take significantly more money. And yes, turning on the law does depend upon the acceptance of the law by those who will now occupy office, which is why the government is promoting on its political side its advocacy for the ruling People's National Movement.
And looking at that 33 years, someone was saying that, well, actually, Victor Legachon talks about local government reform started with NAR and looking at the creation of the Ministry of Decentralization. So he's asking whether or not that emphasis is tied into the impending property tax. How do they coexist with each other?
So local government reform actually started with the Exchequer and Audit Act, which took away the powers from the county councils, brought it to central government because they said, look, local government can run better if you centralize it. So they wanted to integrate everything. That experiment has not worked. We now say, give the power to the corporations, but we're doing it with the public procurement law. As ugly as it may be in some ways, as difficult as it is to operationalize, because the public procurement law allows the corporation itself to procure, not the Minister of Finance, who may be your political opponent. No, we're saying you take the power to spend, and therefore the reform has a chance at success. So this is a very different approach. It wasn't an NAR approach, etc. It was way back in the Sinanan committees, etc., that we really had this position. What has been lacking is the political will to do it. So we drafted the law. In fact, I am the drafter of the law, and my job is to operationalize the law that I myself drafted.
I like the fact that you talk about issues such as procurement regulations, because this ties into a question that Larry Tobias had. We have about 2 minutes more before we take that break, but he's asking, Honourable Minister, what safeguards are there in place to make sure that the authority and power given to politicians or officials are not abused? And especially he cited reference of looking at the THA and possibly not everything you may want it to be, seeing that the legislation, it mirrors heavily what is happening at the THA Act.
So it doesn't mirror that much of the THA. The difference is that we have a public procurement law. We have the audit and other committees chaired by the minority. In other words, then, who does not control the corporation chairs the audit committee so that the scrutiny happens. Remember, under the public procurement law, you now have challenge proceedings. You, in fact, have 4 ways to challenge any procurement, and that is a massively different equation this time. So we're saying take more money, but take tremendously more pressure in how you spend it, and you're accountable for it.
And we are also accountable for time. We take a short break. We are coming back. We are speaking with, we'll also remind you that you can visit rdlg.gov.tt for more information to help inform your decisions. But stay with us. We return with the Minister when we return. Back to this conversation. We are speaking with the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, Faris Al-Rawi, and we are speaking local government reform. Very happy that we're able to speak specifically to these things, but give us an idea of some of the pieces of legislation that are tied or will impact local government reform first.
So local government reform actually is a universe that attaches onto a lot of other laws. Number one, Valuation of Lands Act, because you got to value property at a rental value and take a very tiny percentage of that for your residential taxes, it works out to $1 a day or $2 a day. So Valuation of Land Act, Property Tax Act, the Planning and Facilitation Act, the Town and Country Planning Act, the Environmental Management Authority Act, the Public Health Ordinance, the Land Settlement Agency, the Housing Development Corporation. They're all associated elements. Why? Because they've got properties inside of local government. The Education Act, the Municipal Police, the Police Service Act, the Supplemental Police Act, the Special Reserve Police Act, and it goes on, which is why the Miscellaneous Provisions Local Government Reform actually was an amendment to 10 laws, advertising, traffic regulations, etc., because that universe exists inside of local government. So there are a significant number of laws. It ties into central government, the Constitution, the Appropriation Bills, the Exchequer and Audit Act, the Corporation Taxes Act, etc. So perhaps it is why a former Attorney General is actually putting it on. Because if you really want it on in a quick space of time, you have to know where to go, and you don't have the luxury of time. The Prime Minister is insistent that local government must be delivered to the citizens of this country. And what we're saying, very simple, forget the highfalutin aspects of it. More jobs, faster spending, crime and security to be dealt with. Let me give you an example, laws. We amended the Evidence Act to allow for CCTV camera to be primary evidence, so you don't have to tap somebody on the shoulder, hey, it was you I see thief. The Evidence Act is amended. It ties into the Police Service Act. It goes into the Standing Orders and Regulations. It goes into the Criminal Procedure Act. Municipal police and local authorities now have the ability, City of San Fernando, invite people to have cameras everywhere from their homes, use it as open source police reporting, tie it into your municipal police. We've developed an app to know where the municipal police are, 2 minutes away, 5 minutes away, 7 minutes away, and that way you can get convictions without exposing yourself. So there's a huge connection to a number of laws. What we have to do is to make it work faster and to have transparency, so you remove people feeling that anguish. I can't get my street light fixed. I've reported this leak for 2 years and nothing has happened. The garbage is piling up for 2 weeks at a time until we cry and beg. The grass is 12 feet tall because the neighbor won't cut their grass and there's a victim circumstance. All of that is in the reform law, making it faster with local employment, taking money from the society and getting it done.
So those consequential amendments to changes have already,
Yes.
they already exist?
Yes, they are all in the package. There'll be some further amendments to come inside of the Municipal Corporations Act, for instance, with municipal policing, because we don't want to have our municipal police running on people for a market offense, summons, warrant, court. The same way we fixed motor vehicle and road traffic to put demerit points or fixed penalty tickets, the same way we dealt with cannabis in its decriminalization. You have to make sure police are doing proper police work. Nuisance work can be dealt with by way of fixed penalty notices. You're breaching the market violations, same way we dealt with a breach of not wearing masks. You just treat with it that way. The interesting fact is that I'm the architect of all of those laws that declog that system. So now we got to bring it into local government because these things matter. You want your 1,500 municipal police doing community policing, having the power of arrest, dealing with people who are in jeopardy. If you look at the statistics on murder and you look at familial murder, i.e. provocation or circumstances that husband and wife, domestic disputes, neighbors or family related, there are almost 600 people that you can identify over 2 years that are in that bracket. Early intervention by municipal policing means you cut that down in the numbers and you get to know your communities at work. So we're about community policing, but using the laws, the Evidence Act, etc., etc.
And break that down for me in the sense that what obtains now with regard to, you spoke to municipal police and special reserve policemen.
So the municipal
and how
police,
will that change?
Under Section 48 of the Municipal Corporations Act, municipal police are created. They have all the powers of the police. So they are the police. They have statutory powers of the police and common law powers of the police. There are aids to enforcement. There are the supplemental police and there are the SRPs, the Special Reserve Police, that also operate. So policing in Trinidad and Tobago is TTPS, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, Supplemental Police, Special Reserve Police, municipal police, and under the supplemental police, you have estate police, etc. And then there's the private security industry. So remember, we have legislation to now use private security industry in a different way. So what the Prime Minister is driving us to do now is to pull the pieces together. I had 7 years of drafting all those laws, so I know them like the back of my hand. The government knows them like the back of the hand because it's one team, Minister of National Security, etc. What has to happen right now, having purchased and implemented all of these things, time to pull the strings together, bring it forward and let it take form. A puppet lying without a hand that moves it or orchestrates it is merely a bunch of strings and pieces. Now we have to make sure that we animate the reform, and that's what this is about.
And it makes me want to ask sometimes, what is to your experience, the biggest myth, misnomer that people have when it comes to implementing local government reform or local government reform itself?
The expectation that a different person will do it differently without changing the system. Every councillor that offers himself or herself forward, yes, I'm on the ground, I want to serve people, I'm from the people, I have a great idea, I see some land over there that we could develop. Well, what you building on the land if you don't have the money? How are you going to fix the roads for the very people that ask you and you're in consultation with if you don't change the system of it taking 19 steps and a year to approve versus 7 steps and weeks to approve? We come on this occasion to say, listen, we're changing the system. We're not saying we're going to change it, that we passed the law already. We want to operationalize it. We, the PNM, want to win the election. Why? Because we want to put it on without political objection. I fear, and I'm taking off the minister's hat and I'm putting on the political representative hat now, I fear that a vote for the UNC, the opposition, means a delay in the delivery of relief that people need simply because there's a general election ahead. So we'll have 2 years of suffering, of blocking, of obstructing, when people want their services now. You can judge after, but let the system go to work. When I was passing the criminal division, and I said, let's do courts online, let's have public defenders, let's decriminalize marijuana, let's have child marriage abolished. They stood against all of those things. Today, you go to court on camera. The prisoner does not move from the jail. But there was odium and objection. They went to court on everything. They challenged the criminal proceedings rules. So my experience with the current opposition is that they just block. Because if they are not in charge, everything must fall down in this country. The young people, if you are engaged in your communities as we are, I'm there till midnight every night inside of communities, etc. They just simply say, listen, I want a chance at looking after my family by having a job. I want my services done. You get repeated requests in San Fernando, listen, I want a job in the hospital, or I want a job in what they still call the borough, meaning the city corporation. There are only so many jobs, but if you increase the capacity by having more money, giving the power to procure right there by the corporation will no longer be hiring people just to clean the road or build a box drain. They now need people to look after the schools, to look after community centers, to do play parks, to do sports, to do local economic development. So it's a very different field that we have created. And we're not giving an expectation of, well, I think so. We're telling you how it's going to be funded, how it's going to be monitored, how it's going to be audited, and how much faster it's going to be.
But looking at that difference between personality, someone says, well, I have this idea and I want to implement it, versus process, changing that system. What kind of timeline are we looking at in terms of saying, okay, well, these things already exist, but it is time to implement? What kind of timeline are you looking at?
Well, I can tell you we've developed nearly 99% of these already in the ministry. The apps are built out. The process maps have changed. The process for full implementation is sequentially related to August 14th. You have to install a council. The council then has to, depending upon how it works and what objections the UNC is going to bring, we then need to move to full-time councillors. We then need to establish the standing committees. This year, we're expected to collect property tax, and it's the corporation that collects the tax and not the Minister of Finance. So the corporation is expected to collect its taxes. We've built out the system for that. We've given the power for the corporations to hire their own people. You don't need to wait on the service commissions. You can do it yourself. So the rapidity of that reform is going to be associated by the common sense of deciding, well, do you let the government continue its work and let it happen? And of course, that's a democratic thought that's going to be polled, literally, on August the 14th.
And the last question that we had from Kalinda G, before we ask for closing statements from you, what local government benefits apply to gated communities?
Well, gated communities now have the chance to be vested in the corporations. So if a gated community needs its garbage picked up, its drains looked after, the government can't spend tax-paying dollars on private property necessarily. So a gated community, eventually the roads inside of gated communities have to be vested in the corporations. We've done the vesting orders. I'll take them to Parliament very shortly. The second type of community that we are promoting is going to be virtually gated communities, where cameras can do the gating for you. Remember, we have a system of RF tag IDs still to come on number plates. We've digitized the Ministry of Works. All number plates and licensing positions are now all digital, so that there's now a tie-in there with the company's registry, with the TTPS, with the Ministry of Works and Transport. The judiciary has access to that. The ticketing systems. We built a completely different ecosystem. You're going to see the effects of it over the next couple of months. So virtually gated communities have a chance at success, because many people will tell you that neighborhood chats are really a wonderful thing. I see X, be on the alert to Y, call the police come. When it's time to prosecute, the police need a witness. And people are saying, well, sorry, I don't want to be that guy, because there's fear and intimidation being promoted. And understandably, people have concerns. We're taking that away by the sections in the Evidence Act. So that all comes into local government as well, because the municipal police have to monitor, investigate, charge, and prosecute. And you can't convict or acquit without a trial, which must have evidence.
And we're very grateful that we were able to get these answers from you. We're grateful that you were able to send in your questions, and without really wearing the political hat too much, we're just looking specifically at what local government reform entails. Also reminding you, you can visit rdlg.gov.tt. This has been In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Thank you very much, Minister Faris Al-Rawi. And we want to thank you on behalf of the entire TTT News team for tuning in.